Welcome to Universal God Message of Peace. And I'm Lee Weisman, Dr. Zahir, and that's Lale Tanzer. And we've been meeting every week to discuss issues of mutual interest in the Jewish tradition and Muslim tradition. And today we're going to we decided together to talk about ways of worship. That's what we started today. And I'm going to try to kick off by being a little unconventional, and tell a story. And you can thank my daughter for reminding me of this story this morning. So it's a story that, and the theme of the story actually, I think, may be familiar to Muslims because I think that there's actually a similar story, I think. The story begins similarly, I think even about the prophet. But okay, this just for illustration's sake, this is our prayer book. This is one of our prayer books. This one happens to have actually an Arabic translation. Yeah, there's of course we have translations in English and other languages. This happens to be an Arabic translation. But story goes that there was a very great rabbi by the name of the Baal Shem Tov. And he was the founder of the Hasidic movement. And he was he was meditating in the woods. He's meditating in the woods. And a voice came to him in his meditation and said, it says, your partner in heaven, the person who is your equal in paradise. It says he lives in a little village very nearby. And his name is so-and-so. And he gave his name. So he thought to himself, he said, wow. He says, somebody like that, I mean, I'm a great mystic rabbi. I mean, somebody who's my equal in paradise. Like, I got to meet this guy. So he goes to the guy's house, he knocks on the door, and he says, listen, I'd like to, I'd like to stay with you. I've been wandering around the woods and I have no place to go. And, could you give me a place to stay? So the man is very kind. He says, sure, you want a place to stay? No problem. Okay. So he's watching the man very carefully to find out, he must be some, hidden mystic. He must be some special guy. I mean, if a voice from heaven came and told him that this is my partner in paradise, he must be awesome. He must be, oh, wow. So he watches the guy, and the guy wakes up very, very early in the morning. So he thinks, oh, he's going to do some mystic prayers, something amazing. And what does the guy do? The guy picks up his prayer book and he starts reciting the entire prayer book from beginning to end. He does the morning prayer. He does the afternoon prayer. He does the evening prayer. He does everything all at once. Right? And it's very clear he has no idea what he's saying. Right? He's mumbling. He's mumbling. He clearly doesn't understand Hebrew. He's reading the Hebrew page, right? From beginning to end, doing morning, afternoon, evening prayer, all of them together. And the Baal Shem Tov says to me, he says, you think, what's going on here? And he says to the guy, he says, what are you doing? He says, I'm praying. He says, do you have any idea what you're praying? No. He says, do you understand that there are 3 prayers a day, and there's a morning prayer, there's an afternoon prayer, and there's an evening prayer, and this has a time, and this has a time. This guy says, I never heard that before. I never heard of it. Somebody gave me the prayer book, and I read it. I go from the beginning to the end every day. I don't know. That's all I know. So he says, no, 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 no. So now what you're supposed to do. He said, look, make me some pieces of paper. So he takes some pieces of paper and he cuts a piece of paper and he starts putting little pieces of paper into the book. And he says, okay, so this from here to here, right? You say this from this time to this time, and from here to here, this time to this time, from here to here, this time to this time. Okay, you got it? And the guy says, hold on, let me check. Okay, so he says, from here to here, I say this time. Yes. Here to here, I say this time. Yes. Here to here, I say this time. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now you understand the time? Not exactly. Okay, he explains it again. He tells the guy, he says, listen, explains it again, explains it again, explains it again. Finally, the guy says, I got it. Thank you so much. So the Baal Shem Tov thinks, well, I don't know, maybe now the guy will become some kind of a saint, who knows, whatever. But I guess I was sent here to enlighten him, to help him with his prayers. So he sets off. So the Baal Shem Tov sets off. You're going to excuse me. There's a miraculous thing in the story. What can I say? It's that kind of story. So Baal Shem Tov sets off. And the guy, of course, he sets off in the morning and the guy starts to pray. He starts to pray and he lifts up his siddur and all of the little markers fall out. And he forgets, like, where did the morning end in the afternoon? And he gets upset and he goes chasing after the Baal Shem Tov, right? He comes chasing after the Baal Shem Tov. He's like, wait. I lost the markers. I don't know what you told me. I forgot what you told me. Chases after him. He says the Baal Shem Tov comes to a river. Comes to a river. What does he do? He takes a handkerchief out of his pocket and he throws the handkerchief onto the water and he steps onto the handkerchief and he floats across the water. So the guy who's following him, he sees him do this, and he thinks, now, what am I going to do? So he reaches into his pocket. He has a handkerchief. He throws on the water, right? And he also steps on it, and he goes floating across the water too. And there they are in the middle of the water, and he catches up with the Baal Shem Tov, and Baal Shem Tov looks over him and says, what are you doing here? He said, what do you mean, what am I doing here? I'm following after you. He says, I had this book, and I lost all the I lost all the markers, and now I don't know what to do. And the Baal Shem Tov looked at him and said, how did you get here in the middle of the river? He says, well, I saw you, and you threw down the handkerchief and you floated. I did the same thing. I threw down the handkerchief. I'm floating too. He said, do me a favor. He says, go home. Whatever you were doing, just keep doing it, right? Just keep doing it. Okay. Obviously, if you can do this, whatever you're doing is good. And I decided to start with that story because there's really two dimensions when it comes to the worship of God. I have to acknowledge that there are two dimensions. There's the rules, right? There's the kind of there's the structure of worship, of the ways that we worship God. And then within that, there's a heart of the way that we worship God that the structure cannot contain. And it's important to remember both of those things. And normally I would start the other direction, right? Normally I would start the other direction, but I think it's really important to put that heart out there, right in the center, to realize that part of what worship is trying to do is to channel and contain a human need and desire, even a fire, to serve our Creator. And finding a way to do that, finding ways to do that, which which work well with the human mechanism is what that's all about, right? How do we take our humanity, how do we take our humanity and how do we um, elevate that to worship? And how do we take the things that we do, which are speech, thought, action, and raise them to serve the creator. So I wanted to start with the inside first and then move to the outside if you don't. So that's the story. Okay. Okay. Questions about the story? Any questions about the story?
Um, no questions. I think the point is well made and well understood. That it's basically the spirit, the sincerity that matters. The form is important, but the form, well, it comes later. Um, so long as you are there, your heart is there, you're sincere, you want to thank your God, worship Him. Uh, Even if you are not doing it in the ideal form,
Right.
so long as you're doing it with the right spirit, that is what matters. So I think
Well, I
it's
think yeah, I think that's really I think that's really important because it's so easy. Yeah, I'm going to describe kind of the externals, and you know, the the uh, as the Code of Jewish Law, page 2, right? Page 2, right? It's right in the very beginning, says that a commandment that is done without intention is like a body without a soul, right? It's like a dead body, right? Um, and at the same time, right, at the same time, you could also argue that an intention that's given no form is like a ghost, right? It doesn't have it also, so we have to have both of those things together. So just in terms of general kind of outlines, Jewish worship uh, is based on the same basic, I think the kind of constituents are very similar to Islam. Of course, there's prayer. Um, I'm always hesitant to call, we have set prayers. Okay, so every day we have 3 set prayers. We have set prayer in the morning, set prayer in the afternoon, and set prayer in the evening. Each one which takes place during a certain window of opportunity. Ideally speaking, right, if you're going to pray, ideally, you would pray the morning prayer exactly at sunrise. That is you would begin before sunrise, right? You begin before sunrise, and then you would hit the kind of main point at exactly sunrise. Most people don't do that. They go somewhere within the window. Um, they go somewhere within the window, and then there's an afternoon window, and then there's an afternoon window. Then there's an evening window that begins at nightfall. Um, excuse me. Under certain conditions, you can join the afternoon prayer and the evening prayer if you're praying together. If you're praying together, and you're not going to be able to reconvene for a second, for a third time, you can combine the second and third prayer together. You can do them both at the same time. Ideally speaking, you should pray in a group, right, of 10 adult Jewish men, which is called a minyan. And if you can do that, that's preferable. I try to do that. I try to do that every day. And but for some reason, if you can't for some reason, you can also pray by yourself. If you're traveling or for whatever reason you're at work and it's impossible, then you can also pray by yourself. The three prayers are a little bit different. The morning prayer is a good bit longer. The main prayer is exactly the same. So it's called the Amidah, or the standing prayer, which is done in a whisper, standing in a whisper, and there's bowing that goes. There's four sets of bowing that goes into it. Um, and um, uh, that's the main prayer in all three of those uh, daily, weekly prayers. But then there's preliminaries, preliminaries and post prayers. And in the morning, those are much longer. So in the morning, prayers can take about 45 minutes to an hour. Oh, excuse me. I have a terrible frog in my throat today. And excuse me. I don't know why this is happening to me today. Um, it has about 45 minutes now, and in the afternoon, only 15 minutes, 20 minutes. In the evening, also 15, 20 minutes. And the prayers, hold on one second. Here am I. I don't know why my throat is not clearing. Heaven help me. Um, it's not nice at all. Sorry, I apologize.
Don't need to
Okay.
apologize.
Okay, I don't know what that's about. I think it's just not used to talking. Um, so the three prayers a day, and then there's an optional. There's a short prayer before bed, which is a little bit structured a little bit differently. It's not exactly a formal prayer. It's kind of more of a preparation for sleep. And then there's a midnight prayer, which is kind of a midnight vigil for the destruction of the temple, which is more of a Kabbalistic practice and not done by very many people, but some people do it. Um, um, I certainly did it for many years. Um, so, so I guess minimally three, and then you have uh, the two extra, and on holidays and so forth, then different things are added and so forth. Our 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 ritual tends to grow over time. People add things, right? So various kinds of compositions get added in. Sometimes they're added in as options, but then people decide to say them all. So it can be a little bit, honestly, like trying to stuff 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound bag, because there's quite a lot to do. People can move very fast. It's not recommended, but that's unfortunately what a lot of people do. And at least for Orthodox folks, all the prayer is done in Hebrew, which can be problematic because not everybody knows Hebrew well, right? So there are people are doing their prayers sometimes for many, many years, but may have very little, you know, real understanding of what it is they're saying, which is, I think, um, uh, very sad. Um, of course, in addition to that, there's the practice of the Shabbat, the weekly Sabbath, which is to refrain from many activities for one day a week. So for 26 hours, we don't ride cars, we don't cook, we don't use electricity, we don't use our computers and such things. Keep away from those things and spend the day devoted to prayer and to being with family and meals, um, and uh, and to resting and to studying as a kind of a day for God every week. It's a very big discipline. It requires a lot of organization in life, right? To make sure that, you have the kind of job that allows you, to work, and that you live in a community that's close enough to the synagogue so you can walk because we don't drive. It's quite a big discipline. Um, and of course, we have many holidays. Unlike Muslims, who only have two Eids, we have lots of them. We have many, many, many holidays, tons of them, um, and which also most of them require that we don't work, that we don't drive cars, and we don't use electronics and things like that. So those are kind of days away from ordinary reality. Um, and we have fast days also as well. So there are 4 regular fast days, which are kind of like um, dawn to nightfall. And then we have 2 24-hour, 25-hour fast days. And then many optional fast days. So my rabbi used to fast every Monday and Thursday. There's some people who do that. Um, there are people who fast. I know people who have fasted every 10 days. Then there's other kinds of fasts after holidays. Some people fast the Mondays and Thursdays for 3 weeks after a holiday. And there are all sorts of different kinds of fasts that people do. Or if you have a bad dream, some people fast. Or if you have on the death anniversary of somebody, some people fast. Or anytime that a person wants to correct their behavior or work on themselves, there's always the opportunity to fast. So I think and that's kind of the basic worship, I think. There may be more than that, but that's the basics.
Great. Uh, there are a number of questions that arise, and obviously we will do it alternatingly, one myself and the other Dr. Lalin. Let me begin with this simple question. Understanding the Jewish prayer from the point of view of what I understand the Muslim prayer. When we talk about prayer and the way it is to be done, although there is material which is available in writing,
Right.
but primarily our discussion ultimately takes us to what the Prophet did. Now, it seems from what you're saying that instead, in your case, there is a book which is the point of reference. Am I right, or is it somewhat different?
Well, yes, but the book really is the product of oral tradition. Right, so really, the Torah itself says nothing about prayer.
Okay.
Right, so almost nothing about prayer. We have the example of King David, right? We have the Psalms, which are a lot of the prayers that we use come from the Psalms. So we have examples of prayer. But the actual structure is something that was created, and we say created because we don't know exactly when began. The Torah talks about sacrifices, right? And people would go to the temple and sacrifice. But people couldn't always go to the temple. People were doing something else, right? They were engaged in worship in their local area, and that seems to be the origin of our prayers, is that this is what people were doing. Now, this could go back all the way back to this could go all the way back to the time of Abraham, that people would pray. And at first, um, the prayers, it's, and our sources are pretty clear about this, that the prayers were pretty free form, that people would have like topics, right? So there was kind of people would agree upon the topics. These are the things that we pray about. And there are a few texts that are from the Torah that we kind of include in the prayer. But it was relatively underdetermined. And as time went on, the rabbis didn't trust, to be truthful, right? Didn't trust people to be able to compose their own prayers on those topics. And so they composed prayers on those topics. But those really originate, even though they got written down, they kind of originate from oral traditions. Even to the extent that you have in the Talmud, arguments about the wording. Say, well, in this academy, right? In this academy, they used to say this, and in this academy, we used to say this, right? And be slightly different. The wording might be slightly different, might be on the same topic, but they might have used different. They might have used different wording. Or they'll say, if the prayer leader, heads into this direction, says this, then you should take them off, because it means that they're somehow, they have some there's some heterodox ideas that are getting kind of infesting in their prayer. So prayer certainly used to be much more fluid, and really historically it has grown, it has developed a lot, but really so even though it's written, it's largely based on oral traditions.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Lale, your question?
Feel free to ask another question. I don't really know what to ask, really. I've got a few questions, but why don't you ask? You said you had lots of questions, so you ask another one.
Right. I was wondering, you mentioned the fact that it's primarily in Hebrew.
Yes.
And but again, I can't stop myself from comparing it with the Muslim prayer.
Yeah.
We have 4 components. We stand, we bow down, we prostrate, and then we sit.
Right.
Now, could you kindly explain the components a little more, and also the fact that when we stand, we recite the Quran, which is in Arabic. So there is a similarity. The Hebrew is the original language of the Torah. Here it's Arabic.
Right.
But a little more bowing, sitting, and prostrating. Is that there in your prayer?
Yeah. Yes, there is. So it's interesting about prostration. So I'll start there, because it's an interesting. So what you would call sujud, right? Prostration.
Right.
By the way, you should know so the Aramaic word for our prayers is salat. So,
wow.
Right. So it's that's in Hebrew it's tefillah, but in the Aramaic of the Talmud is called salat. So there's a clear connection between the two. The prostration is done. We still do it for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on the New Year, and on the Day of Atonement. We prostrate. Some communities in Yemen and Egypt continued to prostrate during our prayers, but in most communities, prostration, that prostration stopped on a daily basis. Nobody's exactly sure when, honestly. And it may have been with the advent of Islam that they decided we should look different from them. That's certainly possible. It's not clear when that stopped. And in fact, in Egypt, the son of the great jurist Moses Maimonides, Rabbi Avraham ben Harambam, who was the leader of Egyptian Jewry in the 12th end of the 12th century, in early 13th century. He tried to reintroduce it, actually. He tried to reintroduce it, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It wasn't widely accepted, but in some Yemenite communities they continued to do it. But so now, instead of bowing all the way down to the ground, except for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we bow at the waist. So it looks kind of like we bow at the waist.
Okay, that's like ruku.
Like ruku, right? Exactly. Yeah, like ruku. So we do that. So we do that 4 times in the course of the. We do that 4 times in the course of normal, the course of normal prayer.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, and then and we step back 3 times, and we go light. We look here, and we say, and we wish peace. This peace, and wish peace. So that's another similarity. Another similarity there. And ideally speaking, you're supposed to hold your hands, right? Your hands over your heart. And think with your right hand over your left hand. Yeah. Right hand over your left hand. And it interests, and there are different opinions about whether you should move or not. We keep the feet together. And many people, they rock, they move a lot. Some people don't. So my rabbi did not. My rabbi would stay perfectly still. And I stay perfectly still, but some people rock quite a lot. And that's based on a verse in the Torah. Torah says, Kol atzma tomarna, all of my bones will speak to you. Right. So the idea is that your entire body should be involved in it. So people, when people, you'll see if you talk to religious Jews, when they talk, they move around a lot because we're used to when we study.
I've noticed that.
Yes, when we study, we constantly constantly keep moving. So that's it's a cultural habit. So I always try to keep myself a little more.
Lots of Muslims do that. Lots of Muslims.
Yes, I know. It was amazing. I remember going to in my neighborhood in
India.
Chennai, there was a little madrasa.
Yeah.
And I remember going, and I remember the first time and seeing the kids, and I was like, this is like, they do it too. It was great. Yeah.
I was living in Wales in the early 90s. I was doing my PhD, and the campus was taken over by the Jews for a while. It was a small campus, and the kids were reading the Torah, and it amazed me. All of them were doing like this, and he said, "This is what Muslim children also do."
Yeah. No, it's a thing. And some people rock when they pray. Some people don't rock when they pray. I'm a non-rocker. The Maimonides says that you shouldn't rock. It's interesting. All these things have their logic, right? Just the logic for not rocking. It can disturb your peace, and other people also, right? Because slam into the person behind you, but you want to be careful, be careful, who you rock into. But also, but for other people, it really helps them to, maybe it helps them to, to get themselves into it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of standing up and sitting down. I always explain that as standing up is whenever you're bearing witness to something, we stand up, right? Whenever we're bearing witness, whenever we need to have a specific focus, we usually sit down. So if it's something that requires, like, for example, when we proclaim God's unity, right? There's the Shema, which is really like the kind of focus on God's unity. At that moment where we sit down, we even cover our eyes to kind of block out the world, right? And focus inward, because that's a moment where, so that would be something which would be seated. And when we're bearing witness to something, then usually standing up. Or if you're in a supplication, right, where you're standing directly in front of God, so to speak, obviously not, not in a physical way, but when you're standing, then we're standing at attention, right? Standing at attention, and with that standing focus. But yeah, the similar. I think that if a Muslim comes into a synagogue, they will immediately recognize things which seem very familiar, especially if it's also if you depends if you're in a Sephardic synagogue. I pray in a Sephardic synagogue, and people who are mostly from North Africa, Iran, Egypt, and Syria, and so obviously it's going to be even more similar, right? Because the music and the sound is going to be very familiar.
Can I? Sorry, Dr. Lale, your turn.
I was just going to say thank you so much for explaining all that to us about the ways of Jewish prayer, according to the sages and teachings of the rabbis. There's a lot of similarities with the way that Muslims pray as well, from what you've mentioned. When it comes to sort of ways of worship, I think so many people, when we mention the word worship, we think of praying, and we think of, and my children say, well, and I used to ask this question, is why does God need us to pray to him? Why does God need us to worship him? So one thing I would like to ask is that, how would you answer that? And secondly, I've come to the understanding of the word of worship myself as actually more of the meaning of obedience, and that, we all worship something. We all choose to worship something. And this is how I've tried to answer that question, is that we all worship something. It's what we choose to worship is, and that might be, different. And my understanding, please correct me from, what your understanding is that things like prayer and fasting and giving to charity and, that all the physical things we might do is there to bring us to a spiritual place where we worship by being a certain way or behaving in a certain way. For example, walking in, his ways of peace, to bring us to forgiveness and to gratitude and kindness and respect and compassion and that type of thing. So if it's not bringing us to that place, then what is the purpose of it? If God, and actually is prayer more for ourselves, because God doesn't need anything from anyone. I found it really interesting when I was learning Hebrew, is that when you hit palel, Hit
Right.
pal.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah. So when you're praying, it's the verb is actually you're praying to yourself, isn't it? It's like, or not
For
to
yourself.
for sorry, for yourself, sorry. But it's sort of, so if you think about it like that, it's,
Right. So the
you know,
verb for prayer is a reflexive verb.
yeah.
It's a reflexive verb.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look into one direct, we can pray in a certain direction or in this direction, but actually, um, God is within us, and
So
he's every.
you don't actually pray to, it's as if you don't pray to God,
Mhm.
right? It's as if you don't, it's as if you're not praying, okay, that's what you're praying to God, but not for God, right? In the sense that
Yeah.
prayer is for your benefit. God doesn't need your prayers, right? God doesn't, for me to say, God, you're great, you're wonderful, you're the king, you're the king, you're the compassionate one, it doesn't need me for that, right?
Why does God, so from your perspective, from your understanding, why does God want us to worship him? Because in the Quran, it says that I created the jinn and man in order that they should worship me. So what does this mean from what your understanding? How would you sort of,
Because we need it. Because we need it. Because we need to have a relationship with him. We need to be living in gratitude, right? We need to be living, so we need it, right? We're the ones, we have an emptiness. We have an emptiness that only he can fill. And so he offers us the opportunity to have a relationship with him. There's also there are different ways of understanding this. So so the usual word for worship, if we're going to translate the word for worship in Hebrew, it would be avodah, right? Which is like ibadah, right? Avodah, right? Which is servitude, right? Servitude, service, servitude. And there are two ways, I think there are two ways of understanding why we have those ways of relating. So one is, I'll quote Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon was wrote the first book of Jewish philosophy in Arabic. All the books of Jewish philosophy were in Arabic. Um, honestly, that's yeah. It's interesting. Jewish philosophy, almost all the early books of Jewish philosophy are written in Arabic. That was the language of philosophy, and that's so. Um, so the first one was by Rav Saadia Gaon in Egypt, and so what he said it's like imagine you have a kid, right? And he comes to you and he knocks on your door and he says, Mister, um, can I mow your lawn? I don't know if they have that in UK, right? Can I cut your grass? Can I cut your grass? Right? And your grass doesn't really need cutting, but you really love this kid and you want to have a relationship with this kid. And you see this kid wants to have a relationship with you. The kid wants to know you, right? So what do? You say to the kid, you know what? You know, you can cut my grass, and I'll pay you for it. Do you need your grass cut? No, you don't need your grass cut. But you want to have a relationship with the kid, and you want the kid to have a relationship with you, and it's going to be, and you know that it's going to be a fruitful relationship. And so he says, so that's how it is with God. God gives us ways to relate to him, right? Out of a love and compassion for us, and even gives us a reward for it, even though he doesn't need it, right? Even though he doesn't require it. But also at the same time, right? Also at the same time, he's helping us to develop our character, right? All of these things that we do, right? All these things that we do help develop our character. Think about what it means to pray 3 times a day, right? that impacts your character. It means you learn how to stop, right? You learn how to stop and how to pay attention, right? Not just to God, but also to other people. You learn how to structure. You learn how to structure time. You know, it these things have your impact on character. Think about what it is to give a little bit of charity every day, right? A person who gives tzedakah every day, a little bit, right? That changes your character. That helps make you a giver, right? And that makes you more like God, so to speak, who gives in the world, right? So all of these things, so all of the different forms of avodah, all different forms of worship have a benefit, also have a benefit for us, right? The benefit is for us, not doesn't change anything for the Creator. The Creator never changes, right? God doesn't change. He's not influenced, so to speak, by the things by what we do. But nevertheless, it gives us the opportunity to connect to him, and it also gives us the opportunity to become more like him, so to speak. Whenever I say that, obviously, I mean, you know, with all the differences with all the differences in the universe, but to the extent that we can become, compassionate, the extent we can become generous, the sense we can have those qualities that he has, we can, and the things that he asks us to do, they help us to develop those things.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Rabbi Wiseman. Dr. Zahir, would you like to ask another question?
Yes, Dr. Lale referred to this matter of direction of prayer. We one of the formalities is that when we are praying, we direct towards the Kaaba, Makkah. Do you have a particular direction, or is it that you can pray
Oh, yeah.
and okay, what is it?
I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to demonstrate. We're going to have an actual demonstration. Okay, you ready for this?
Yes,
Hold on.
please.
Hold on. It's coming. Thank goodness we have this. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we have the app. Here it
Okay.
is.
All
Okay,
right.
so if you could, yeah, you can't really see the app. Okay, so right on the top there, it says Mizrach. Okay, so that's the direction of Jerusalem. So wherever I go, I have the app and I point and it tells me that Jerusalem is that way. So
Okay.
we always pray towards Jerusalem. So wherever,
Right.
and if you're in Jerusalem, you pray towards the Temple Mount where Al-Aqsa is, right? Actually, you pray towards where the Dome of the Rock is, right? And if you were on the Temple Mount, if you were like at Al-Aqsa, you would pray towards the in the direction of the Dome of the Rock. So basically so wherever you are in the world, right? Wherever you are in the world, which it's interesting, in most places it's like 3 or 4 degrees from Mecca. It's
Yeah.
very close. And in some places it's exactly the same. So for example, one good thing about Istanbul, right? One of the good things about Istanbul is um, in Istanbul, Mecca and Jerusalem are exactly aligned. So it's exactly the same direction. And I think it's also also in I think Morocco, I think it's also the same. I think it's also the same Morocco. I think it's exactly
Okay.
the same. So it it works out nicely, especially in Morocco, because all the mosques have a direction pointer on the top of them. That's a kind of a Moroccan feature. It has a direction pointer on the top, so you always know which direction to go, which is it's very helpful. It's very nice.
You know, there is a mention in the Quran, at least one passage, probably it's more than once, that it refers to a dispute between the Jews and the Christians regarding turning towards east or west. Are you
Right.
aware of it? Are you aware of it? What reference it
I
is?
don't, well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, east or west, I, we usually say, it's interesting because most people lived, to the west of, outside of the land of Israel, people lived to the west of Jerusalem, right? So we always say, okay, you pray east, right? Because that's generally the direction that you're praying, but with, north or south. But if you were, for example, if you were in Singapore, right, you would pray west, right? You're praying the other direction. So yeah, I don't know. Um,
It's similar in the case of Mecca. I mean, it all depends on
right,
what part of
right,
the planet you are.
whatever direction, whatever direction you're in, um,
Yeah.
whatever direction you're in. Um, but it's a there are different, and then there's different ways of,
Okay.
people have, there are different ways of calculating, like, the direction, so some people go by the straight direction, some people go like over the earth direction. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, there's,
Yeah, I know. I know. It's a
there's
discussion here amongst
yeah,
Muslims as well. That's right.
yeah,
It's
Really
quite
interesting.
similar.
yeah, it's
Just a
there's
brief
different.
question on my side, Dr. Lale, then
Yes,
I'll
yes.
leave it to you. You referred to this word salat in Aramaic. I was just
Yeah.
wondering how similar are Hebrew and Aramaic?
So Aramaic is similar to, well, it's weird. Aramaic is as similar to Arabic as it is to Hebrew.
Okay,
It's really, it's it it's yeah, it's as similar to Arabic as to Hebrew. I mean, if you know Hebrew, you kind of can figure. I mean, most of us never learn Aramaic formally. We kind of pick it up along the way, because you have to learn it for, and we don't learn it formally. We just kind of start reading and pick up the grammar and so forth. But a lot of the words, right? A lot of the words you'll find in, you know, a lot of the words you'll find in Arabic. It's it's very common that it's very very common that you'll find them in Arabic. Um,
right.
you know, uh, yeah, yeah, there's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of similarity. Yeah. And there, we do have some prayers in Aramaic also, which is interesting because Aramaic was really the spoken language of Jewish people for a huge chunk of our history. It's one of those, it's a very strange, I mean, it's a language with an unusual history because it was spoken in a lot of places. There's in Afghanistan, in
Okay,
Kandahar,
okay,
there are pillars that are in that with Aramaic inscriptions. There
okay.
was there were whole swaths of the Assyrian Empire that spoke Aramaic. So it was a pretty popular language. Now, of course, there's just a few communities that speak it in Iraq. There are a couple of there are a couple of there are a couple of Aramaic speaking communities, Christians mostly, actually. Um, but and there are, of course, Christians who pray in Aramaic, right? There
That is what I was saying. Jesus' language was Aramaic,
It's
isn't it?
Aramaic, right? Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and when you read the Gospels, very often, like sometimes they'll like have like little quotations in Aramaic, and it seems, and and sometimes if you're, I took one semester of Greek, and I took one semester of New Testament Greek, and it was weird because like sometimes you look at it and it's like it wouldn't make any sense. And then I'd realize, oh, it's translating from Aramaic, right? Because it was like somebody said, and I realized it didn't make any sense, but it's like, okay, in Aramaic, it makes perfect sense. So, and there, of course, is an Aramaic translation of the Torah, probably the I'm going to say the second best. The best translation of the Torah in any language is in Arabic. The Rav Sadia Gaon, the scholar I mentioned earlier with the first book of philosophy, did a translation of the Torah in Arabic, which is, I think everybody would agree, is probably the best translation of the Torah. And there's an Aramaic translation of the Torah, which everybody studies. That's also very good, but it's different. It's more interpretive. It's more
Okay.
interpretive. Yeah.
It's fascinating. Well, thank you so much. It's all very fascinating, isn't it? Learning about how people worship and different cultures and traditions and religions. And I think the world there's a lot of chaos that can be caused by religion when we get stuck in the rituals and say that this particular way of doing it is the right way and that is the wrong way and that type of thing. And I think many of us in the world, I think the place where we fall is when we, say that one way of doing it is better than another. And I loved your story in the beginning because it reminds us and highlights the importance of how important the intention is. And actually, as you said as well, Dr. Zahir, that's a really good starting point. And if we intend to seek truth, then and ask God for guidance, He will show us ways of worship and guide us to the ways that please Him most, God willing. I also have come to the understanding myself, though, that I was a little bit extreme that way in the past. And as I matured, I came to realize that actually it can also go in the other direction. So, for example, someone might not intend something good initially, but they might be very strict with the rituals. And we should also not be too judgmental against people who seem to be stuck in the rituals and who might not feel the love inside, because that too can purify and can lead to purifying our hearts and our thoughts and our speech. If we keep doing a physical practice, like the commandments, I guess the commandments from the Jewish perspective, doing the 613 mitzvahs. Some people might say, well, I don't feel it in my heart. Should I do it? I would say, yes, do it, because, you might not feel it yet, but, you will, God willing, if you intend to feel it, and if God intends, then it will get there. And it's like giving to charity, the more you give to charity, the easier it becomes, and one good deed leads to another. So we shouldn't be too judgmental on people, really. And yes, sincerity is really important, but it's also important to do things. I think where we go wrong sometimes is when there's arrogance comes into it, when we think that our way is better than your way, when actually we should remind ourselves that the direction in our hearts is the most important. And as long as we face our Creator, then God willing, there's many ways of worship.
There's a beautiful book called the Sefer HaChinuch. It was written like in Spain during the golden age of Spain. And it's a father writing to his child. And one of the things he says in the book is he says that the heart follows the actions. He says, sometimes you're doing the things, you're doing the things, but your heart isn't in it. And he says, but nevertheless, you should still do, because if a person is not such a great person and they do good things over and over again, it will change them and will make them a good person. On the contrary, if you have a person who's basically a good person, but they do a lot of bad things. Eventually that's going to influence them, and it's going to harm them, and it's going to harm their characters. So he says, you know, that, so I think you're absolutely right that you have to look at people, you know, the people who do the outside stuff, the people who do the inside stuff, and for ourselves, try to work on both of those things at the same time, and you know, to cultivate the inside, cultivate the outside, make sure that everything is said there was a rabbi once decided to open up an academy, and he said that there's one rule, that every student, their inside had to be exactly like their outsides. I says, and it was of course an empty academy, nobody showed up. Because nobody can say that, right? We're, you know, nobody's exactly the same inside and outside. So, Be'ezrat Hashem,
God
inshallah, we'll all
bless.
develop ourselves and become.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Well,
Jazakallah.
thank you so much. God bless you both. God bless everyone watching this. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like it to reach more people. God bless you. Shalom. Salam alaikum. Bye-bye.
Wassalam. Bye-bye.